Oh, this is not letting me get on this live chat for some reason. I've
Oh, now there's a bit of an echo.
so am I waiting for live chat to start?
No, that was me. I had my volume on my phone up, so yeah, just turn it off. Mm-hmm. I'm a science teacher for almost 20 years now. I have a degree in evolutionary biology. I've been on numerous shows over the last 20 years. Atheist Moms, and I could list them over and over and over again. But yeah, I've been on many shows. I've been on Kent Hovind's Creationist Hour and a Half back in the early to mid 1990s, Infidel Guy show, stuff like that. Just talking about basically I just used to call him up on a regular basis, and he got pissed off at me at one point because I would call him almost every day, basically pointing out how he was just misrepresenting and blatantly giving misinformation about science. But yeah, yeah, I know with R and Ra as well, the same thing. But yeah, I've been active all the way back to like Usenet in the creationist community, basically showing how they are misrepresenting science back to the mid 1990s. And I've just been an advocate for science all my life because I grew up with it. My father being an environmental engineer, and my mother being an active person in the natural sciences, and it was something that I came about because it influenced me early on, due to the fact of Edwards versus Aguillard in 1987, and I saw that effect in my school before the Supreme Court case came down and basically said that creationism is not science, it's a theology. You know what? I've just researched it ever since. Started out as a cultural anthropology major in college, studying comparative religion and basically looking at how religion has changed over the years, studying history of the Bible, even at seminary. And when I switched schools to basically get my degree in evolutionary biology, I went away from cultural anthropology and went more towards the actual pure science degree, kind of looking at mainly paleontology. Did studies on both pollen and foraminifera, which are these microscopic seashells that you can find, basically showing how they changed over time. Was written up in a paper about foraminifera. And one of my professors in college, David Milne, actually debated Duane Gish back in 1978. So when I told him my interest, he, encouraged me, gave me a bunch of material, some different sources. So I really started to look at it more closely, and that's after I graduated with my Bachelor of Science. I started a dual degree in philosophy of science, which I never completed. Basically looking at the history of creationism from the 1850s to the present, which at the time was the early 2000s.
Okay, so I'll just say what I said last week, I guess. I was basically raised an atheist. My parents were atheists. And I don't need to go through that whole story, I guess. But when I became about 20, a guy gave me a chick pamphlet. And it showed how that many of those monkeys were not really part human. They were just monkeys. And even today, Neanderthal, for instance, the information I have is that they are actually just human. So, and in fact, a lot of people have Neanderthal blood in them today, according to the DNA science. So, I'm not what you'd call a college student of any respect. I mean, I've got probably 30 college credits, or maybe more than that. I don't know. I've taken about 4 college classes in my life, so and I passed them all. But that's all I've done as far as college goes. And but being raised a atheist like I was, with that same book that had the monkeys all the way to the humans in it, that was a part of my life growing up. So I had every reason to believe that my ancestors were monkeys, and that but as I now look into things a different way, I look at things from a different perspective, I see that God is real. And when it happened, I guess the moment that I changed, which I discussed this last week, I had some warts on my hand. I remember it was a hot day, and I just prayed, God, if you're real, take these warts away. And as a month or two later, I realized they were gone, because I forgot all about my prayer because I didn't care about it. That's just what it was. And they were gone. And So maybe another 10 years later, I'd had a football injury when I was like 18. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. By the time I was like 30, 32, I got to where I couldn't even walk. So I was sitting in church one day, and before that, I'm thinking, well, I haven't done it yet, but I'll make an appointment up with the doctor, and they can probably fix it. It's probably an easy thing to fix. And I'm sitting there, and the pastor says to everybody in the congregation, he says, this is going to be a night for healing. And so he read out of the book of James, and the book of James, which is one of the last chapters in the New Testament, he says, if they're sick among you, call for the elders of the church, they anoint you with oil and pray for you, and you will be healed. So I'm sitting there thinking, well, I'm not going to waste God's time on that. So, because I know I can go to the doctor. And in the meantime, there's about, 6 or 8 people getting up in front of me. And so they're all prayed for, and it's my turn finally. I didn't say this, but so I finally decided, well, I might as well give God a chance. And so I get up there, and it's my turn. And the very half second that he touched me on the forehead with that oil, I felt this heat go into my knee. And I still didn't believe it. I didn't want to act like I believed it. And I sat down, and I moved my knee around to figure out, well, it hurt when I went this way. It hurt when I went that way. It hurt when I moved it this way. Well, it was completely gone. So, that's my reason why. I guess I'm one of the reasons why I'm serving God. That's not the only one, but He's proved to me that He's real. And yeah, I could go on and on, but so that's just the short version.
Okay, it's cool that you mentioned Neanderthals and. The fact that we have Neanderthal DNA is also a clue that Neanderthals are not humans, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to decipher whether or not we had Neanderthal DNA. But I recently did a show with a university professor who's writing a book on the metal of Neanderthals, and this is about piercings and tattoos. We're about to set that show up. If you want to watch that, keep an eye on Ross channel, because that's where the show's going to be. Okay, this is my time to leave and leave you guys to it.
Hey, so, join back in any time, Peter.
The only time I need to join back in is if things go wrong. I don't think that's going to happen, because I don't think it has been necessary the last few times. So I'm just going to sit back and watch. So I'll give the floor to you guys and have fun.
Well, I think there's a couple really interesting things to talk about here. The first thing being, of course, that Neanderthals, predate your, because we've talked about this many times on Twitter, Craig, is that, you don't think the Earth is more than 6,000 years old. You think there was a flood around 4,400 years ago. You think there was an ice age right after that. Neanderthals predate all of that by hundreds of thousands of years. I'm going to throw out a few things here, because I just want to see how you respond to them. So that being the first thing, you bring up Neanderthals, we interbred with them, you accept that from, well, you just said you did. And this was brought up in the last conversation you had with Professor Flynn. And again, all of those things predate your mythological Noachian flood, which we know was copied from older mythologies. That being one of the first things. The second thing being, wait, I'm going to bring up a few things, because I want to hear how you combine all of these things together.
Okay.
The second thing being how, and this came up with Flynn, and we've had conversations as well about this on Twitter, how you basically deny all of science. You claim you love it, but you basically deny every single field of science that disagrees with your theology. And you call it evolution science when, of course, that isn't a thing. There's evolutionary biology, but in fact, you deny every field of science. You deny chemistry, geology, linguistics, psychology, sociology. We can go down the list. I don't think there's a field of science that you don't deny. And the last part of that is that you deny all of them because of what you just said in your opening. You basically deny all of them because of your theology. And that's what it all comes down to. This has nothing to do with science in the end. It has to do with you wanting to have this certain theological view that the earth is, only, or I should say less than 10,000 years old, because that's kind of the basis of young earth creationism. Having a flood only about, again, 4,400 years ago, which you've stated over and over again on Twitter, which just does not match any reality. So instead of claiming that you love science and then basically disregarding all of science because of your theology, I don't understand why you can make those two totally separate claims. I mean, they're totally inconsistent with one another. So it either seems that you're being willfully ignorant, which is just a nice way of saying that you're lying about it. You are personally incredulous, which means you don't really even understand the evidence that's presented about these topics because you want to deny them outright. Or you're just denying reality, again, because of your theology. This isn't not a theological conversation. God has nothing to do with it. Your religious beliefs have nothing to do with it. So it's really confusing when you bring them up. It's like, what does that have to do with anything? It has nothing to do with the conversation. It doesn't matter what you believe as far as, your religious beliefs, a deity existing or not existing, has nothing to do with atheism, has everything to do with evidence when we're talking about how we explain the world around us. So if you were going to bring your theology into it, I don't understand why you would do that, unless that's the only reason that you have to deny reality. When you make certain claims about science, every field of science basically being having to be guesses or thrown out, or that you don't accept them because it doesn't match your theological view. That's what it seems to come down to. It has nothing to do with science. It has everything to do with your theology. So I kind of, and getting back to Neanderthals, you just said you accept that Neanderthals, mated with humans. Well, Neanderthals haven't existed for, tens of thousands of years, which predates your theological claims about a Noachian flood and the Earth only being 6,000 years old. It's totally weird. I mean, it's like cognitive dissonance. You don't understand that you're saying one thing, you're claiming one thing, and then you're basically using scientific evidence which denies your claim to begin with. It's really weird. It's almost like you don't even understand what you're talking about, to tell you the truth. I'm at a loss to even know why you bring up theology when you're talking about science is kind of the main point here.
Okay. So, I think the way you look at evidence is different.
No, wait a second. That's exactly what I was just talking about. I'm not talking about your theological interpretation. Because that's where you're going. You're going to say that it all is like, God is the source of all the evidence we have. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about evidence. I'm just talking about how science interprets evidence and how we come about making a theory. Because theories explain facts. The fact is that we have genetics and paleontology that create phylogenies, basically these trees of life. These trees of life from genetics and phylogeny match each other, but they're taking two different lines of evidence. And they're supported by other fields like chemistry and physics and geology that show that these phylogenies happened over millions and billions of years. And this is not an interpretation. It's not a guess. It's just what we observe. It's the facts that we base our theories on. In science, facts are explained. Theories are something that we use to explain facts. So we have all these disparate facts. We have all these facts from all these different lines of evidence, all these different fields of science. They're disparate, which means they're taking evidence from totally different things, but yet all these things match each other, which should not happen. We shouldn't have basically, geology saying, yeah, it takes a certain amount of time for sediments to lay down and to form rocks. And we have rocks formations all over the earth. Some of them are sedimentary. We know that some sedimentary rocks take a certain amount of time to form because you have the process of lithification, which means that the minerals inside those sediments won't combine together to make a solid structure immediately. It takes a long period of time to do that. We can measure that using physics and chemistry. We have physics basically saying that if we have a layer that is also laid down within those sedimentary strata that is volcanic, we can date that radiometrically to say it's a certain number of years old. We have chemical signatures within those rocks that basically say that certain isotopes are laid down when you have a different composition in the atmosphere, and we can compare that to things outside of rocks. We have genetics saying that you build up mutations over time at a certain rate, which might speed up or slow down because of environmental conditions, and that matches chemistry and physics and geology. And then of course we have paleontology that says that you have these fossils that we find in these geological strata that are dated by chemistry and physics and geological rates, all known. These are known rates. They're not guesses. They're not, you've always said on Twitter it's a guess, so you're just guessing about it. It's not a guess. We know how long these certain processes take. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Okay, well, you just laid about 8 things on me there real quick.
No, they're all the same thing. They're not 8 things. They're basically that we have all these different fields of science that all converge on the same answer. So it's not like there are 8 different things. No, they're all evidence that leads to one explanation.
Okay. So do you want to break them down one at a time, or how do you want to do this? So you want me to talk about them one at a time, or how do you want me to do it?
How would you like to do it? I mean, are you going to address... Are you going to address genetics? Are you going to address paleontology? Are you going to address the isotope ratios? Are you going to address the radiometric dating? Are you going to address that we know through geology that sediments form at certain rates? And what does any of that have to do with your theology? Why do you bring in your deity into this conversation when it has nothing to do with it?
Well, it depends on how you look at it.
No, it doesn't. No. We're talking about evidence.
Does.
No, we're not. We're talking about evidence. We're talking about evidence. As far as science goes, we are not talking about your theology. And your theology is creationism, is what it comes down to.
Yes, that's true.
Yes. Oh, your theology is creationism.
I guess.
Okay. So wait. Before we go on, then,
okay.
How does your creationist theology? How does that explain the world? Let's just go there first, and then we'll go to the science, right? Because first you basically have to explain what your creationist theology says and what the evidence is behind it, before we can talk about how you think that refutes every single field of science known.
So what part do you want to hear?
Well, like I just said,
about my theology.
What is your creationist theology? What is the evidence behind it? And then, how does your creationist theology refute every field of science that you claim that you love science? I mean, you've said that numerous times. You claim you love science, but yet, but yet, your statements basically are totally opposite that, because your creationist theology denies every field of science.
Well, I disagree with that statement, but
Go ahead.
okay, all right. But I disagree with. I think that the way the creation scientists believe is 100% following science. Now, to me and to you, science is something that is observable and repeatable. If I have a dry rag and I
Wait a second. I
stick
thought
it in
you were
water,
going. No. I thought you were going to explain your creationist theology first.
I'm,
What is the
okay.
evidence for
Well,
what is the evidence for your creationist theology
I was going to get there pretty quick, I thought.
with a dry
But
rag?
anyway, if you have a dry rag, I
Yeah.
have a dry rag and I stick it in the water, it's going to come out wet. That's provable science.
Okay.
see
What
it. I
field?
can see it happen.
What field of science is that?
I don't know.
Exactly. Gets to
I
my
don't know.
point.
But
Yeah.
that doesn't make what I'm saying wrong. Just because I don't know
No.
the
It
name
just
of the science field.
it just means that you don't even understand basic science, because you don't even know what you're
But
talking about.
okay. Well, I don't feel any less because I don't know that. I've only had, like I said, 4 college classes, so that doesn't make me any dumber or any smarter than you or nothing. We're on the same level here. So it's all in how we look at the evidence. So again, science, I think you believe this, is science is something you can repeat and show, right? Is that science? Yes or no?
That's a very small part of it.
Is it science?
Again, it's a very small part of it.
Okay. So science is something.
And if you want to
I
bring up repeatability, we talked about this on Twitter. We talked about how I don't think you understand the difference between repeatability and reproducibility. So basically, you think that we should be able to put everything in a test tube, but that's not the way science works. It's not like we're going to recreate it in a lab. That's not what science says. So when you're bringing up repeatability, I'm not even sure what you're talking about. So for one example, I brought up the fact that you have this known genetic mutation that happens in people in Nepal, in Tibet. This one genetic mutation that allows them to reproduce and basically live at these high elevations at a greater rate than people who haven't been there for generations, going back again beyond your mythological Noachian flood or even the mythological 6,000-year-old creation event. We know for a fact that these people have been living there longer than both those events. That genetic mutation, that same genetic mutation, happened independently in the Andes Mountains among a completely different set of people at a completely different time. That is repeatability. And as far as being reproducible, well, we know for a fact that it actually happened on the same gene. This genetic mutation happened on the exact same gene in 2 different populations. So there's reproducibility and there's repeatability as far as that goes. Another example, which I know has been brought up with you before, with evolution being reproducible and repeatable, there is the fact that the only reason we found Tiktaalik up in Esmir Island, Neil Shubin found it up there, is because they went to look for it up there. Well, why did they go to look for it up in that weird place? Well, because being that it has to be reproducible and repeatable, they knew that the only place that they could search for fossils of a specific date was to find sedimentary layers in a certain ecosystem, one being a near shore, like an estuarine, basically, the place between the ocean and dry land. They had to find sediments that were basically estuarine at a certain date and were exposed to the surface. So that's repeatability. And due to them looking all over the world and saying, oh, we can't go dig here because, these sedimentary layers are found in a jungle underneath, a whole bunch of soil and sediments, and we shouldn't go look here because those sediments are underground, and we shouldn't go look here because those sediments are not estuarine to begin with. They were either formed on dry land, or they're formed in the ocean, or they're formed in the lake. They repeated the experiment. Basically, they repeated these conditions to go look in a certain place and find, or see if they could find, something that they hypothesized would be there, which is basically this fishapod, this tetrapod that had the convergence between something that lived in the ocean and something that was going to be living on dry land and have 4 legs. That's repeatability. So I think you're not even understanding what repeatability means in science.
Well, to me, repeatability means that I can watch it repeat.
That's, again, I just explained why what you're saying is wrong.
Okay.
That's not what it means in science.
Okay. Well, if I'm going to go to a doctor, he better be able to repeat what he's done on somebody else before he does it on me. That's repeatable, and he's science. So
he's science. Why was
isn't a doctor science?
Why is medical science in that way repeatable? How did they figure out how to do that in the first place?
By scientific studies.
Such as, can you give a specific example?
Well, they probably started with mice. They gave it a certain chemical, and that chemical stopped whatever's wrong with it, and then
mice in laboratory experiments are completely, modern medical science. Let's think about like
science.
Let's think about something like, hey, how did Pasteur realize that diseases?
By heating up milk, it would be better.
If he didn't have milk.
Well, he pasteurized milk. That's what he's most known for.
No, that's just a name that was given to the process. That's not what he's known for.
Well, that's what I know him as. So.
Okay, again, your ignorance is showing through. That's what I'm getting to. So
that doesn't make me dumb.
When we're talking about,
I don't know the stuff you
when
know.
we're talking about Pasteur, and he was looking at the idea of spontaneous generation versus abiogenesis. Was that what he was doing? Was he trying to disprove abiogenesis, or was he trying to disprove spontaneous generation? Because this is something that creationists constantly mix up.
I have no idea.
Okay, again.
I don't know what he's doing. I don't know that much about him, so.
Good.
I just know the one thing.
Well, thank you for admitting that.
Well, I'll admit anything. I'm not trying to say I'm a scientist or great in schoolwork and all that stuff, but that's the world you live in. So that's cool, and I'm okay with it.
No, I think that's the world I think that's the world that all of us live in and rely upon. We rely upon basically having this world where we can test out things, where we can basically say, this is how we know we're going to get a certain outcome. And
that's science.
What is the thing that we can do to give us the best outcome? Or, hey, what is this question that we have? For example, again, hey, this question being, is the Earth 6,000 years old? Or was there a Noachian flood 4,400 years ago? Let's test that. Let's actually test that. Let's look at the evidence and test those things. Because that's where you're coming from. You're coming from basically your set theological view, which you will not give up because it is set in stone, like the 10 Commandments coming down off of Mount Sinai. Basically, you're saying these things cannot be challenged. We can never even give an inch on these things. Well, you are, because what happens is that when we present evidence to you, actual evidence that refutes what you're saying, you totally deny it and you say, oh, it's just a guess. Oh, you're just guessing about it. How do you reproduce that? How do you reproduce the Grand Canyon? And
And
then
yeah,
and then we bring up stuff like, hey, we've actually had real floods that have occurred, real known floods, because your flood doesn't have any evidence for it. We know the Grand Canyon wasn't formed by a flood, but we have these real floods that we know occurred at a certain time period. The Missoula floods after the last ice age, which was far older than, a year or two after your mythological Noachian flood, like you like to claim. You say there was only one ice age. It happened after the Noachian flood, which is, kind of crazy. Why did everyone in the world not write about that? Why is that not in the Bible? But let's actually go back to it. We have this real flood that we know occurred because we can date it with evidence from geology, evidence from physics, evidence from chemistry, evidence from biology, and that is the Missoula flood. This is the best one to bring up. We could bring up a whole bunch of other ones. So the Missoula floods in Washington State, we know that happened after, and it extends into Oregon as well, but it's mainly in Washington where we see the scablands, the channeled scablands that go through most of eastern Washington. We know that happened because an ice dam broke. We know it happened around 10,800 years ago because of various fields of science. We know the outcomes of it because we can see them. I mean, part of Portland, Oregon, where I grew up and lived most of my life, the north part of Portland, Oregon is built upon this outflow after it came through the Columbia River Gorge. You have these sediments that were laid down by it. We know that happened. We know that it went all the way up into the Willamette River Valley. We know that happened more than once. We know these Missoula floods were not just a single event. They happened numerous times. We can, again, date them using carbon dating, which you totally deny is reliable. We can date them.
Not true.
No, you've said it on Twitter many times. We can post those if you like.
No, I've never said that.
No, you've said multiple times on Twitter that you do not think carbon dating works, and you try to say the reason for that is that carbon-14 is found in diamonds. So, and the whole thing about carbon dating is that it totally disproves again your Noachian flood and your creationist 6-day creation event 6,000 years ago. So. Again, we have all these different fields of science saying, hey, this one flood happened. And we know it happened in Washington State, and we know it happened because of an ice age and an ice dam breaking, releasing flood waters from Lake Missoula, which was in Idaho and Montana. And so we can actually see what happens when a catastrophic flood happens. And then we compare that to the Grand Canyon. And in the Grand Canyon, we have all these sedimentary layers that are built up over time. And your claim is that all of these sedimentary layers in the Grand Canyon above the great unconformity, I'm supposing, because those are all those layers that are formed like this. You think that all those were cut off. This is the creationist literature that you're reading. All those were cut off, and then everything above that was all laid down by one flood. But we know that, those layers... First of all, they're not flood sediments. None of them are. Second of all, we know that some of them were formed in environments that preclude a flood, because they are either biogenic, which means they had to be laid down by living organisms, and those living organisms took thousands of years to lay down corals and stuff like that. They are sandstones, which we have many layers and show evolutionary progression. We have radiometric dating because they were volcanic dikes that go through certain layers and then were cut off. And then other volcanic dikes that went even up higher and were cut off. We can radiometrically date those. So again, you seem to be denying all of science because of your theology. And then there's, of course, the other fact that we know that, hey, the reason the Grand Canyon formed is that we have this Kaibab uplift that occurred. On the north side of the Kaibab uplift, we can actually see how the stream on the north side of the Kaibab uplift was actually flowing north. And we know that because of the way that the rivers on the north side are all feeding in this way. And on the south side, they're all feeding the opposite way. So at some point, there was basically a stream capture that happened. It was probably after The streams basically came together through erosion processes that take thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, that then connected to a lake that was on the north side, and that increased the erosion event. And you have these meandering pathways that don't happen in a flood event. I'm just trying to cover a lot of stuff here because we've had all of these conversations on Twitter, and everyone can look them up. That's the nice thing about Twitter, right? Unless you delete your tweets. I've already pointed all of these things out before. So that's why I'm trying to bring all these up, and that's why I keep going back to asking you, why do you deny all of science because of your theology? Because that's what it all seems to boil down to.
Well, again, it's all in how you look at the evidence.
That is not no. If you are going to make that statement, you need to specifically address anything that I've said. You just can't say it's all how you look at the evidence. That is not an answer. That's an excuse. If you are going to say it's all how you look at the evidence, then you need to specifically point out anything that I've said. You can't just say it's all how you look at the evidence. That doesn't mean anything. It's completely worthless. It really is. And it's really kind of pathetic. Because that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about how you look at the evidence. We're talking about evidence itself. I've provided you explanations for observed facts. What are your explanations specifically for anything that I said at all?
Well, I do have one explanation, if I could get it out.
Okay.
So you brought up sandstones, these different kind of stones that you see on both sides of the Grand Canyon.
I didn't say both sides. It's all one layer, which you've already
They're not on both sides?
No, again.
They're not on both sides of the Grand Canyon?
Again, sandstones are, of course, on both sides. And if you're going to claim that we find them like all over the earth, we don't.
Well, I guess we're looking at the different evidence.
Then you would have to provide... No, you would have to provide evidence for your claim. I mean, we can actually go to the USGS site right now, and we can see that the sandstone layers, which, again, the layers in the Grand Canyon are not all sandstone. So that doesn't even mean anything to begin with.
I'm not saying they are. I'm not
saying good. Which I already brought up, that some of them are aeolian. They are basically, they're not formed in water. So we know it couldn't be been laid down by a flood. And then on top of those, there are layers that were laid down in water. But again, none of those layers that we see in the Grand Canyon were laid down by a flood. We know that for a fact. So what are you going to bring up with the sandstone formation being extremely large and found over an area of, part of North America, the continental North America? And if you're going to claim that they are found all over the earth, where is your evidence for that? Because that's what you have brought up on Twitter. You say, the sandstone layer is found all over the earth. Right?
Well, that's what I've been reading.
That's what you've been reading. Where? Where have you been reading this?
Well,
Can you give a citation?
A lot of videos to look at them.
Oh, I don't want a video. I want a scientific citation. I want actual evidence. I could give you a video that says that the moon is made out of cheese. I could give you evidence. I could give you a video that says, hey, if I poop in a bag and throw it in the oven, it turns into a diamond. What you're saying is completely worthless because you can't back it up. That is my point. That's what I've been bringing up on Twitter this whole time. You instead of actually providing evidence, you basically just provide videos of what are called prats. Prats are points refuted 1,000 times. We know what you're claiming. We know that it's not based in anything besides creationists basically trying to make money off of people to sell products to them because they feel good for a creationist basically telling them what they believe about their creationist theology. That's what it comes down to. I want you to provide actual evidence. You've never done it. I've asked you many times. I mean, there are so many threads on Twitter where I have basically begged you to provide evidence for what you're saying, and you never do. I mean, you don't even respond to them. You know, I point out the facts that I've just pointed out about the Grand Canyon and the layers in the Grand Canyon. You know, none of them being flood layers, all of them being different ages. The fact that these sedimentary layers in the Grand Canyon have a sequence of fossils in them which are conciliant, they're consistent with evolution. The fact that we have these volcanic dikes
and creation.
No, these volcanic dikes.
Yeah,
that's a claim you just made. These volcanic dikes that go through the Grand Canyon and are cut off, and then you have another one that comes through and is cut off. The one that goes higher up, of course, is younger, and those are radiometrically dated, and all those dates refute what you're saying about your flood. I mean, we have this volcanic formation in the Grand Canyon that basically makes it almost pretty much all the way to the top layer in the Grand Canyon, basically, you know, to the rim of the Grand Canyon, and it flows down the Grand Canyon, and we know it's only a couple of thousand years old. We have older ones in a similar area that are cut off, do not go all the way to the top, and they date to be, you know, tens if not hundreds of millions of years old. And this again goes to the fact that you just basically deny all of science because it doesn't fit your theology. It doesn't fit your creationist theology.
Well, okay.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, that's how it is.
Well, I don't agree with you, but I mean that's okay.
No,
I mean,
but you just did.
I mean,
you
you're
just
very,
did agree.
You're very convinced of what you believe in. That's for sure.
No, I'm not convinced.
I mean, I can hear. No, I can hear how convinced you are.
I'm not convinced. I'm not
Yes,
convinced by it. I'm basically repeating to you what we observe. It's not that I'm convinced by it. No, you aren't, because you haven't provided any evidence for your claims. No, you haven't provided any evidence for your claims. You say, go watch this video. Yeah, go ahead.
It's written down too. I mean,
written down where?
You can go to creation.com. You can go to Answers in Genesis. You can go to all these
different. You can go to Hugh Ross.
You can go to ICR,
if you want to go to older.
You can go to
ICR. But you don't. But you can't actually explain them yourself. If you don't, if you cannot show what you were saying, then you don't know anything about what you're saying. That's what it comes down to. Basically, you are making these claims. So you can go here, you can go here, you can go here. But apparently, we can go all those places, but you don't even know where to go because you can't explain it yourself. I just explained a bunch. I just gave explanations.
I can explain all of those. I mean, you don't let me talk.
Okay.
So what's the big deal? I mean,
explain the scablands in Washington State and the fact they are dated through radiocarbon dating to be just over 10,000 years old, and there were multiple events of this flood occurring that happened, more than 1,000 years apart. Explain that fact through radiocarbon dating. Explain the layers that were laid down from those events, again, being over 10,000 years old. And explain the geological processes which we know occurred in those, as well as the isotope levels in the rocks that were found using your creation. Well, wait a second. Starting out this conversation, I asked you for a theory of creationism, and you never even presented it. But, explain those. Explain those using creationism. Explain the Missoula floods using creationism. And the fact that we know that it's older than 10,000 years, the fact that we know, that this flood has nothing to do with your mythological Noachian flood 4,400 years ago, the fact that we know that it happened during the end of the last ice age, and there were multiple ice ages before that. Explain all those using your creationism theory.
You just threw in the ice age on me. So,
no.
Which one do you want to hear?
It doesn't. Well, in a way, it doesn't matter. I just want to hear you explain them.
Okay. Well, I'm not a expert on what happened up in
You
Washington.
keep saying
but I have.
that. You
Okay,
basically.
so what do you want me to say?
Well, I don't know. If you're a non-expert and you don't know what you're talking about and you don't have any evidence to support what you're saying, I don't know what you're going to say. What are you going to say?
Okay. So, to me, an expert would be somebody who knows every little detail about it. And I don't say that I know every detail, but I have watched videos on it. So it's something like there was some big lakes up there at one time, and so after Noah's flood, you have a lot of areas where there were lakes, and as rains come, as the one ice age came, that maybe started 200, 300, 400 years after Noah's flood, that you have this ice dams and so on that happened because of what happened, and so that would cause those different lakes and streams and things that happen. And that you're calling that the Missoula? Is that what you're calling it?
The Missoula floods, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Floods.
So, and that's how that can happen. It's real simple to see.
No, there's multiple floods. I think there's
Sure.
over half a dozen.
Exactly. So
half a dozen, and
exactly.
the period of them happening is easily over 1,000 years.
Not a problem. Not a problem for Noah's flood at all. So, you got the one ice age that came down so far. It only came down as far as.
Are you going to present
maybe,
evidence for anything you're saying?
I'm telling you what the
No,
evidence is.
Are you going to provide? No, you're making claims. You're making unsupported claims. Are you going to provide evidence for anything that you are saying?
I can.
Please do. I'm waiting.
Okay, well, I'll get it for you. You mean you want written evidence?
No, I want you to present it right now. You're making claims. You're basically just blowing it out of your ass to be, polite. You're not presenting. No, you're not presenting evidence for anything you're saying. It seems like you're just making it up as you go along. That's what it comes down to.
I'm not. I'm telling you what I know.
Okay, then provide the evidence. Then provide the evidence for what you're saying.
I could say the same to you, by the way, but
I can give plenty of. In fact, on Twitter, I have given evidence. That's the whole thing.
And I've given you evidence too, and I've given you a lot of evidence.
No, not for the Missoula floods.
Yeah.
For the Missoula floods,
I'll get it for you.
I can link tweets right now where you have never responded to pretty much anything I've said about the Missoula floods. So, what is your evidence for what you're saying? What is your evidence that the last? What is the evidence you have for the last ice age being, after the Tower of Babel, before the Tower of Babel? Remember, because according to the Noachian flood mythology, the Tower of Babel happened about 100 years after the Noachian flood, which is really strange to begin with because, and I provided you evidence for this as well on Twitter. If we just look at population growth, if you take 6 reproducing couples after the Noachian flood, there would only be, a couple hundred people at the Tower of Babel.
3 reproducing couples.
That's what I said.
Only 3.
Exactly.
You said 6.
You have, I'm sorry. If you have 6 people, 3 reproducing couples, after the Tower of Babel, there would only probably be a couple hundred people to build after the Noachian flood. There would only probably be like a couple hundred people to build the Tower of Babel, which is it's just insane because we know from history and archaeology that the entire Earth had civilizations during that time. If we're talking about around 2200 BCE, we know the entire Earth, besides Antarctica and some other small places, was populated. We have civilizations that existed over the entire Earth. But basically what you were saying is that 100 years after the mythological Noachian flood, the Tower of Babel occurred, there's only a couple hundred people at the Tower of Babel, and then they spread out all over the world, which we know is just wrong. It's refuted by all known evidence, every field of science again.
Okay.
So again,
on Tower of Babel. Is that where you want to
go? No. I'm just pointing. I'm just pointing that out. I'm just pointing that out before you get to
guys. If I can jump in real quick,
your explanation of the Ice Age.
if I can jump in real quick.
Go ahead, Peter.
Cipher,
Peter.
let him respond, because I don't think Greg's
Yeah, I've been
getting-
trying, but every time he responds with like,
I know, but
this is
but
the way
let
it could
him
have
let
been.
him.
It's so weird.
Okay, but let him finish making his point, and then jump in.
I will. Okay. So basically, let's just get this straight. You think the only ice age, I'm sorry, you think the only ice age that the Earth has ever experienced happened after the Tower of Babel? Before the Tower of Babel?
I would say probably during.
Okay. And your evidence for that is?
Well, first you have to understand how that one ice age happened after
And your evidence for that is?
after the flood, after Noah's flood. Okay.
And your evidence for that is?
I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
So the only way that an ice age can happen, and first of all, if you're talking thousands and thousands of billions of gallons of ice that accumulated on the North and South Pole. And so
Actually, it didn't occur on the poles. It occurred in other places. In fact, if you actually look at the polar regions almost didn't get any ice, which was built up by snow. It wasn't ice raining down out of the sky. It was snow that comes compacted over, again, hundreds of thousands of years. We have ice cores to prove that. It happened actually more in what we call the temperate zones. It happened, around between 60 and 40 degrees in latitude. It didn't happen at the poles. It happened in the temperate zones where it was actually warm enough for snow to fall to compact as ice. Go ahead.
So are you saying there's no ice up on the South and the North Pole right now?
We're talking about the ice age. We're not talking about right now.
Okay. Well, so let me see if I can get through this. So if Noah's flood is true, and if it happened the way that the creationists believe it happened, and that is that it was completely destroyed the earth, and while that was happening, you had a lot of volcanic action and warming up the ocean, and all the water that covered the earth, it covered the highest mountains, which we don't know how high the mountains were back then. I doubt if they were like the Himalayan mountains. I doubt if they were that high. Oh, go ahead. You want to say something? Go ahead.
Volcanic action actually cools down the earth. You do know that, right?
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about underwater.
Underwater volcanic action. Okay. Go ahead.
That's right.
So heating up
which a lot of the ocean. Exactly.
Okay.
So after that was happening, the oceans were warm, and then Noah,
which would have warmed up the air as well.
Sure.
Okay.
And but also the poles were still colder than they were on the edges. So
why would that
out
be?
on the equator? What do you mean? Why would that be?
Well, you said the oceans warm up.
Because the waters receded, but the waters were still warm after the flood.
Okay,
the Bible says that
right now we have, really warm ocean waters, and all of a sudden all the, we can probably, like within the next decade, the Northwest Passage, we can go basically across the Arctic Ocean. So I'm just trying to follow your logic here.
Okay. So if you have warmer oceans, that means you have more evaporation, and you have warmer winters, and so by now, you keep interrupting me, so I'm sorry. I have trouble keeping track of what I'm trying to say. So as the flood's over, the oceans have sunk back down. The mountains have risen, like tectonics. Boom! It made these mountains and all that.
Can we get to that later? Your super hyper plate tectonics.
We can come back to that later, of course.
Okay.
So you had all these things happen. It's talked about in Psalms how the oceans or the valleys sunk and the mountains rose. And so, sorry, I'm not used to being attacked like this all the time, so I'm just trying to get through this. So, as the oceans are warm, which it causes more evaporation, which causes more rain and more snow. So all that snow happens up north, and it caused the ice age to come. And
Yet,
as you probably know, the ice age only went down. Okay, now you know where southern Minnesota is, right?
Yet the oceans are
Southern
warmer.
Minnesota and northern Iowa. So you got southern Minnesota. That's about the end of the ice age. It goes south of that in some places. Like it goes as far south as Chicago, I believe, and even maybe below that a little bit. So, but beyond that, that's about as far south as the ice age goes. And I don't know, what was I saying all that about? But anyway, that's how the ice age happened. That one ice age was during that one event that happened over maybe 300 to 400 years. And that fits the creation model.
And your evidence for those unsupported claims are what?
Well, the evidence is that you have woolly mammoths that got stuck up in that ice, for one, and you've got all the evidence of an ice age that they dug out places of the earth where the glaciers moved back and forth and so on. But really, there's probably only proof of just one ice age. There's not proof of multiple. And when you talk about the ice cores, I just got done watching something on a guy that these ice cores, there's no way that you can use those they core drill up in the Iceland and places like that. And
Greenland.
And they try to say that those are
Greenland.
I'm sorry? Greenland, sure. Yeah, probably right. Okay.
Antarctica.
And so
there are no ice cores in Iceland because Iceland is a volcanic island.
You're probably right. I'm sure about that. So, but I mean, if you look at an ice core, and if you try to think of it as being billions of years that it happened over that, or over multiple.
No one says it's billions.
Okay, so millions. I mean, you're saying how many ice? You think there's been what, 5 ice ages? 10? I mean, that's what you're thinking.
What I sent you on Twitter, yeah, within the last 300,000 years, there's been 4. I'll have to look it up again. It's something that I don't constantly look up myself, but yeah, over the last 500,000 years, there have been at least 4, I would say. Yeah.
Okay.
What's
your proof for that? So is your proof for that just the ice cores that they've used?
We do have ice cores going back that far. We also...
No, you don't.
We do.
No.
Yes.
You think you do, but you don't.
No,
because there's really... I mean, think about this. Think about the logic. Okay?
What?
Geological.
Think about the logic. Wait, so let's take the logic here. Annual layers in Greenland and Antarctica, we know for a fact that in both of those areas, you basically have this warmer season called summer. And during that time, you don't have as much snowfall and you get a glaze on the surface because there's some melting going on. And during this colder time of the year that we call winter, we get more snow. It gets compacted. And when that snow gets compacted, we have air bubbles that are captured in it. Now, beyond 60,000 years, we can't measure the carbon-14 in those ice cores. But the nice thing about those annual layers in those ice cores, both from Antarctica and Greenland, is that younger than 60,000 years, we can measure the C14, and we do know for a fact that the C14 that is found in those trapped air bubbles in the snow that turns into ice because it gets compacted, because weight compacts things, getting to sedimentation again, kind of a similar process. We do know for a fact that those layers, the air in those things, those ice bubbles, we can, younger than 60,000 years, carbon date it, and it matches the actual annual layers in the ice. Now, beyond that, we can measure them using different things. And one of those things, which happens in the Antarctic ice cores, is that the nice thing about in Antarctica, there are volcanoes, and there's volcanoes all over the earth. And because of air currents, some of the ash from volcanoes that erupt lands on that ice, and so we can actually date in those annual layers where the ash is trapped beyond the limit of 60,000 years for radiocarbon dating. We can actually date the other isotopes that are in the volcanic ash. And that's one reason that we know that we can extend those ice cores in Antarctica, especially around 500,000 years old. And it's not just a guess. So please don't say that.
You know it is. That's how you know.
No.
Um,
No, it's
yeah,
not just
it,
no,
it is.
because if you're saying
Well,
it's a guess, then basically you're saying one of the four fundamental forces of physics is wrong. You're saying the weak nuclear force is incorrect. And this is a fundamental force of physics along with electromagnetic gravity and the strong nuclear force. You're saying the weak nuclear force is wrong. But yet pretty much, I mean, in your household, like in your house, we use the weak nuclear force all the time. You've got it in your smoke detectors. You know, you've got it in other things around your house. We use it all the time. We use it when you go get an X-ray at the hospital. We know the weak nuclear force works. It's not in question.
okay. So let's see if I can get back to what I was saying. So I don't know a whole lot about those cores, those ice cores that you're talking about, but what I have understood is that, and I will say this, that I think what you're suggesting is that the lower ice is the oldest ice, and the
That's
upper
that's the
ice
law.
is
That's
it
the law of superposition. It's also used in geology. Things that are lower down are
but you're
older. Things that are
suggesting,
higher up are younger. Yeah,
okay, so you're suggesting that that ice has never melted over those years. It snowed on it once and it stayed, and there's never been any kind of global warming in the past, and that that ice
actually,
is
the
staying.
ice layers show that there has been. That's how we actually know that climatic changes have happened in the past. That along, so let's get to three things here to back that up. So the first thing we have is radiometric dating, right? Weak nuclear force, one of the four fundamental laws of physics. We can measure it radioactivity in C14, and then in again these eruptions which have layers of ash that are laid down in those ice layers. We have the fact that you can just see it. There's annual layers, melting period, period of high deposition of snow, which gets compacted into ice. Another way that we can actually measure it is the isotopes that are found within those layers. Because, you know, you have different isotopes of oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, you know, and of course oxygen and hydrogen make up water. You have different basically weights of one element. And especially with oxygen isotopes, we know from those isotopes what the climate was. So when we look at those annual layers that were laid down and we see that they're thinner, and then we actually look at the oxygen isotopes in those layers, we can see that it has a certain amount of the light and a certain amount of the heavy oxygen isotopes, and it correlates with them being thinner or thicker. So that's how we know that the climate has changed over tens to hundreds of thousands of years. So there's three different lines of evidence right there: isotopes, radiometric dating, and of course just the physical composition of the ice and how thick the layers are, and their annual layers. I could go into other lines of evidence. I'm just bringing up the three
Go
that you
ahead.
might understand. No.
Well, um, okay, so um, I think when you look at carbon 14 dating, um, I think you have to look at that. And first of all, I believe in carbon 14 dating. I don't think it's false. but also there's no proof that the amount of carbon that's come out of the sky is the same as it's always been. Because I think you're going to say that
No, we
it's
actually
for the last.
that's an interesting fact as well. So one thing that we know is that we cannot use carbon dating for anything that's older than about the 1940s. Do you know why?
You can't use carbon-14 dating?
For anything that is younger than about the 1940s.
Oh. Okay, all right.
Do you know?
Go ahead.
Do you know why?
Mm-mm.
Atomic.
I think
testing.
I've heard that, but I don't know why.
Okay.
Yeah.
Above ground atomic testing. We really can't use it. Now we can if we calibrate it correctly. And this brings up why I brought that up. Because we can calibrate carbon-14 testing. Radiometric carbon can be calibrated using dates from known sources. And I brought this up to you on Twitter as well. Well, we have ice cores, annual layers, which match dendrochronology, which is living in dead trees, that match each other because of growth ring patterns. And then we have something called varves. And varves are annual layers in certain lakes where basically you get an annual layer because there's more erosion during the spring and summer than there is during the fall and winter. And so they build up these annual layers. I sent you a paper on this on Twitter, basically showing that we have varves in certain areas. One is a lake in Japan that goes back. Again, I'll have to look up the exact number again, but I think that lake in Japan goes back, again, around 500,000 years. Because we have those three different sources, there's three again, those three different sources of annual layers, we can check each one with each other. And we find that they all correlate with one another as far as carbon dates go. And of course, carbon dating can't be used past, around 60,000 years old. But with...
Okay, what would you call that kind of dating? As far as the layers in those lakes, what'd you call that?
Oh, varves. VARVES.
E like Peter?
V like Victor. Victor.
Oh, like Victor.
Alpha.
Okay.
Romeo. Victor. Echo. Sierra. There's my there's my Coast Guard radioman training in being used.
That's awesome.
Do you want me to give it to you in Morse code?
Yeah. My grandpa did that, by the way. That's funny.
Yeah. Being a ham radio operator is fun.
My dad was a sonar operator in the World War II. So, okay, well, I'll check into that, but that's interesting fodder. I've never heard of it before.
I've sent it to you on Twitter more than a dozen times.
Well, but don't forget, there's about 1,000 things that come across Twitter, and I read about all I can. But you only do so much.
Yet for some reason, every time I present evidence to you, you never respond to it. It's really weird.
That's not true. Well, maybe I don't get it. I respond to almost everything.
No,
I've even responded as I read them. So I don't know what you mean. So
it must be selective in some way.
I mean, why? Sometimes I've seen where you put things down like you said. I've already asked you 3 times. You haven't responded. I'm like, that's the first time I saw it.
And then I usually send a link to what I've asked you to respond to.
And I've responded to more than one. So
okay.
Maybe you didn't get my responses. I don't know.
No, I could probably look up VARs.
I'm not afraid to respond to anything.
Okay.
So, but I'm not afraid to respond to anything. So you. So
Craig,
do you
know how to use the
don't
search
respond?
function
It's not
on Twitter?
because. Not really.
Okay. Do you have a phone open right now? You do?
Yeah, I'm on it right now in just a second.
Good. Go to Twitter.
Okay.
I want to see this in real time.
Okay, there's my Twitter on my other phone.
Okay. You're on Twitter. Click on my profile.
Yours?
Yeah. Click on my profile.
Scipher's profile. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
Okay, hang on. Give me a minute.
Should I do this as well so you can
I
see?
hate to put people through this. We should be doing this off air so you could
No,
talk
we
your
should be
stuff.
doing this on air because I think everyone needs to know that you
Okay.
can now do it.
Let's see. Okay, whoop, hang on.
Yep, I'm going to get mine open too.
Now, how do I find you?
Well, you can either type in my name, you can type in Scipher, you can type
Okay,
in
here we go.
Santa Percept, right? And you see this.
Okay, I see it there now. Okay.
You see that?
Okay, I'm on your page now.
Good. You
Yep.
see at the very top, you see there's 3 little buttons. One
Yep.
is the grok. One's the 3 buttons, and one's the thing in the middle that looks like a magnifying glass.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Click on the magnifying glass.
Okay. Those 3
Okay.
buttons are called a grok.
No, the grok
That's
is the
funny.
one on the left-hand side. The 3 buttons, my students always call them the hamburger because usually it's 3 lines, but anyway. Okay, now, what does it say when you clicked on that magnifying glass?
It says search at Slantia Percepts posts.
Type in VARVES.
Is it VERB like Baker?
Victor Alpha Romeo Victor Echo Sierra.
Yeah, I just did that. Nothing. Let me do it again.
Now, that's funny because I got a ton of posts.
VARBES.
Right.
No results.
I got a ton. So here's the other thing you can do is that you will see, because it's right there. Well, I'll let you see that again. There you go. VARVs. VAR.
I'm not seeing it.
Okay.
Yeah, Victor, Albert,
Alpha.
Robert.
Yep.
Yeah, Victor, Alpha, Robert, and
Victor.
then Baker or
Victor. Echo. Sierra.
Okay. Yeah, let me do it again. But I got nothing.
2.
VARBES. No results. I typed in the same way.
Yeah, interesting because when I type it in, the first post that comes up is to you. And it's December 31st, 2004. The second post that comes up is to you. The third post that comes up is to someone else. The fourth post, you were included in it.
Oh, here we go. It says latest. Maybe I got to go to latest. Is that right?
No. You can do top or latest. Now here's the other
The
interesting
top
thing.
is empty.
No, well, it doesn't matter. Here's the other interesting thing you can do. After varves, type in this. Type in 2, T-O, colon.
Now, am I doing like just TWO right after it?
No, just T-O, 2. So from, it's from me, it's going to be to you. Type in your username.
So TWO.
No, T-O.
TO,
Not the
okay.
number, as
Okay,
if
I
you're
got it.
addressing a letter. Then type in your username, Craig.
And do I put a space or anything there?
No.
Yeah,
So
but-
it's 2, colon, the @ symbol, which is shift number 2,
Okay.
and then type in your username. And you will see every post that I have sent to you from me that has the word varves. And if you get rid of the
Okay.
S, you'll just get varv. And you can see there's couple dozen posts. It's like not a small number. And just to make sure.
Hey, give me my address, will you? It's like Craig S, right? Craig SW or something like that. If I don't have it written down, how do I get to
Craig,
it?
well, it's funny that you don't even know your own username. Craig SW 60
Okay. Go
44 7870. I almost even got it memorized.
I've never looked at it, so I say 0447870.
60 44 7870.
Yeah, nothing came up. I got Craig. Okay, here's what I typed in.
Okay, because I will do the same. Yep.
2: Scientia P Circeps. So that's you, and it did that automatically.
No, yeah.
And I wrote 2.
Ari should be in there. Yep.
2: Craig SW 60447870.
Yep.
Right. That's what it shows.
Well, type in or click on the latest. See what happens. Because I'm going to show you what I get.
Well, I get some guy who's choking. You like to put those things on there. That's kind of funny.
Everything when you type that in, everything that you see should be from me to you and have the word varves. If you get rid of the S, you'll just get everything from me to you that has the word varv.
Okay, so now,
dozens of posts,
that doesn't
right?
say the word varves in it, but it does say it. This is everything you've sent me, but this is
okay. That's
so
probably because you didn't include the word varves. If you type in varves in that search, it's just going to limit it to what I sent to you from me that has the word varves in it.
Okay. Well, now I know how to do it, so I'll try to.
Good.
I'll try to do it. Okay. And I'll try to see what all you sent me and all that. So. And to be fair, recently I haven't been on Twitter as much as I normally am. So I've been busy working on my car and stuff. So my wife just had a birthday party, so we planned that, and that was fun.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, she's still alive. I know. Yeah, she's went through cancer and all that. So, but she's doing well. She's actually doing. She just had a checkup. She's doing perfect. So everything's going well.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
So, yeah. So, at any rate, I'll try to figure out what these varves are. I'll look it up and see if there's any other evidence for it or against it or whatever. So, so basically, no matter what I've said so far, you've said that there's no evidence for it.
No,
and
that's what you've claimed. Basically, I've said that you I've said that you haven't presented any evidence, and you've basically said that you don't accept scientific evidence.
No, I accept scientific evidence, but I don't necessarily accept every conclusion, and neither do scientists.
Wait a second.
There's many cases.
How is evidence different from a conclusion?
Well, evidence is something you can see, feel, and touch. A conclusion is how you interpret what you see, feel, and touch.
So you are saying, basically, you are using the word conclusion for theory.
Yeah, that'd be right.
Okay. What is your theory of creationism? Going right back to the beginning where we started. Okay. What is your creationist theory? On anything. You can either give I don't know, the grand unified theory of creationism, or you can just say, my creationist theory for blank is this. Which means you would have to support it with evidence. Because that's the way, again, facts explain theories. Facts are basically evidence. How are facts explained by your theory of creationism?
Okay. Well, I mean, there's a lot of ways we can go on that, but I would. That's why
I said, please just choose one that you want to give me.
Okay. So,
Put a
Wow.
piece of wood in the stove here. I'm listening. I can do two things
Okay.
at once, Craig.
I guess as far as carbon dating goes, I'll just discuss that just for one. I mean, there's like I said, there's so many things we could discuss. So I agree with you that carbon-14 dating. Now, what a lot of listeners don't know about carbon dating is that carbon falls from the sky, and that's where we get it from. Because when the sun rays go through the atmosphere, oh, go ahead. You want to say something?
No.
You go and explain it.
I want you to explain it. I want to hear this.
Okay. So carbon falls out of the sky as carbon 12, 13, and 14. And so it lands on the ground and it becomes fertilizer, and it goes into all the plants we eat. And if you're a carnivore, the animals eat the carbon-14 that's in the plants, and then that carbon-14 is in them. And every day well, what's funny about that? Is that not what's happening?
Carnivores eat plants? That's pretty amazing.
Okay. Well, so I just want your listeners to understand exactly what's going on. So as they continue to eat these plants, they have a certain amount of carbon in them, and when they die, they no longer take in any more carbon. Same with us. If we eat plants, we eat carbon. So that means our carbon in us has carbon 12, 13, and 14 in it. And the day we die, we quit taking it in, and the carbon 12 and 13 is stable. And it's a stable isotope. And then, but the carbon 14 is not stable. And like you said, you can use it for dating up to maybe 50,000 years because it has a half-life of 5,730 years. So, but then again, when you get to that point, then it half-lives again. So that's why you claim you can do it up to, I think, would you say 10,000 years? You can do it?
No, about 60, just under 60,000.
Okay. So on that evidence, which I agree with everything you just said. So what the Bible says is that when before the flood, there was, and we don't know what this was. All we know is that it says that it was there. It says there was a firmament above the firmament. So a solid crystal dome over a flat Earth. Okay. But we don't know. The Earth's not flat. It's never been flat. The Bible doesn't say it's flat.
But that's what the firmament is, according to ancient Israeli, Hebrew, and Babylonian and Egyptian cosmology. The people at that time in that area thought the Earth was flat and the dome was solid. It was a solid crystal dome. On that solid crystal dome, you can look up, this is historical. I mean, this is actually written. You can go find this written documentation from the cultures at that time. They say it was solid on a flat Earth. They say the stars were painted on it, and the sun and the planets moved across it. That's why the word planet basically means wanderer. It's wandering across the sky. That's just cosmology. That's just historical fact. Okay.
Okay.
That's what those
cultures.
That's what those cultures thought, and that's why the Bible refers to various things that people like to bring up. So it has really, again, nothing to do with your Bible. It has to do with what cultures thought at that time in those areas. That was their cosmology. Again, a fact, historical fact. Yeah, historical fact.
But you're looking at it in a different way. So
okay. So what do you think the firmament was?
You gotta let me explain it, though. I mean, if you keep cutting me off, I can say anything.
Because basically what the Bible says is that above the firmament there was water. So above the solid firmament,
it doesn't say water.
It does. Above the solid firmament there was water, and then when the windows in the firmament opened up, water fell down, and that's part of the reason the flood happened. And there was the fountains of the deep as well. So it wasn't rain coming from the sky.
Can I go get my Bible?
Yeah, you can go ahead. Just don't get your children's Bible again. because we already found out your children's Bible, like, is not relevant at all because it leaves out or it changes words. So that comes to: are you going to use the NRSV? Are you going to use the NIV? Are you going to use the KJV? When I was in college studying theology, when I was in college in cultural anthropology,
there was a firmament above the firmament.
No, waters above the firmament. What, can I screen share? Peter, can I screen share?
No. We don't have that option.
Because I see present down here.
Yes, but I don't have that
so
option in the show. What I do have, by the way, and I put those in the chat as well, and I will share the link. I will share the link on Twitter in DM. I have a great video of my friend Lawrence Yufa about the biblical flat Earth. So he's a Bible scholar, and he explains exactly what we find in the Bible and what it means.
That would be good, because if we actually look up just waters in the firmament, that is in Genesis 1-6, or 1:6-7. Yeah. So let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. So God made a firmament and separate it from the waters which are under the firmament from the waters which are above the firmament, and it was so. Genesis 1:6-7. So basically there are waters above the firmament. And then when you get to the Noachian flood, should I read that to you as well?
Well, but you just misrepresented what it just said there. So
no, that's what it says. I don't know what version of the Bible that you're reading, but if we're looking at the flood, then it basically says, yes, you have these windows open up in the firmament, and the water falls down from above the firmament. And here's
what it says.
Okay.
Let's go back to 1
I think it's
Genesis
Genesis
4. Let's just start there.
7:6.
Genesis 1 verse 4.
Okay.
But go back to Genesis 1 and go to verse 4.
Yes, I heard
you. So
you.
God saw... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I heard you.
I thought you were going to say something. Okay.
No.
God saw the light was good.
Wait
God
a second. What version? What version are you reading?
This is NASB.
Okay, just making sure.
New American Standard Bible. Okay.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay. So, verse 3, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So God saw the light, and the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. Mm-hmm. 5. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning one day. That's day 1.
Yeah.
Now we're going into day 2. And God said, "Let there be expanse in the midst of the waters.
Okay,
let it separate the waters."
That expanse is also called the firmament. In other versions, it's called the vault. In other versions, it's called something else. But the standard, is the firmament. You brought up the firmament.
You're right. Expanse is another word for it, evidently. Yeah.
Is for firmament. There are waters to separate the water from the water, right? There's water above the firmament and below the firmament.
It says, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters."
From the waters.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay. So we don't know what was up there, other than there's some water in it, but we don't know what else was in it.
No. It said water. It didn't say some water in it. It just said water from water. You're putting in words that aren't there.
Okay.
It said water from water.
God made the expanse.
Yep.
Okay. And God made the expanse and separated the waters which were below the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse, and it was so. God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening, and there was morning, and that was the second day.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure it's not necessarily saying it's water there. It's saying it didn't separated it. He could be talking about clouds, or who knows what.
The expanse is the firmament, and it says water and waters, and you were trying to put something in there that doesn't exist. It doesn't say water and something else. It doesn't say it was clouds. It says water or waters. That's what it says.
Yeah,
so you're
I
trying
guess you're
to.
right. It does say it's water.
There you go.
But even at that, so that's saying that there's water above, right?
Yeah.
Is that that's what you're going to hang on to?
No,
right?
I'm just saying just saying that that's the cosmology. That's the cosmology of the Hebrews, of the Babylonians, of the Egyptians. That's just known.
Okay.
That's historical fact. We can find it in their writings. We see it written on, tablets, on paper, on papyrus, on whatever you want to talk about. We see it written. It's not a controversy. Okay? So So let's get to Noah in your mythology.
Okay, so, before we back up to that, so up until Noah, we had this expanse or firmament above, whatever was in it, water and whatever else was, but there was more of it.
The solid crystal dome over a flat Earth, yes.
Well, why are you saying crystal? Why are you saying crystal?
Because that is the cosmology of the people of the time. They thought it was solid. They thought you could see through it. No, that is the history that is written down in those three cultures, and more cultures around them, not just those three. I'm just pointing out the three largest cultures.
Didn't say that.
Well, it doesn't matter. That's what the Bible is based on. It's based off of people writing from the culture that they understood. Ancient Israelis, ancient Hebrews thought the earth was flat. They thought there was a solid dome, that was covering. They thought the planets and the sun rolled across it. That's not something that's in debate. We just know that that's what they thought. So it's not like, oh, we're gonna, it's just a guess, or we're gonna try to explain it. No, those cultures wrote that down. That's what they actually thought.
Okay, does that make it right?
It doesn't. Well, hey, that's a great question, isn't it? Okay. Yeah. Does it make it right if these cultures thought that the Earth was flat and it was a solid crystal dome that planets and sun rolled across, because the Earth was the center of the universe? It was a heliocentric solar system. Or, I'm sorry, it was a geocentric solar system with the sun going around the Earth and the flat Earth, and there were pillars that held up the land, and below those pillars was Sheol, and above was this expanse, this solid crystal dome, and above that there was another ocean. So when windows in that firmament opened up and it flooded the earth, that's how the Noachian flood occurred. Yeah, was it right? I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I don't know all the stuff that you're saying.
Well,
but when I read the Bible, it doesn't tell me that it's flat. And I've read it a couple of times. I've never.
Yeah, I'm sure that maybe that's your interpretation.
Either I glazed over it, or exactly. And you're choosing the one that makes them sound like they were dumb back then, and it's okay with you.
No, I'm just saying that the cultures of that time thought it was flat and thought there was a solid dome of the earth, and that's not something that we can debate, because we have historical writings from those people at the time who said that that's what they thought. So it's not like it's up for debate. It's not like it's up for debate. We know that those people in those areas, in that culture at that time, that's what they thought, because they wrote it down and said that's what they thought was happening at that time. It doesn't matter about the Bible. Why are we even talking about the Bible?
Okay.
Remember, we're supposed to be talking about science.
Now,
oh, wait. We're talking about the Bible because that is the basis for your creationist theology. I get it. That makes sense now. Yeah.
Okay, so have you read these things that these people said?
I can look them up and send them to you. Yeah, it's pretty easy to find. Okay. It's not hard.
Was it written in stone?
Sometimes it was, because if you know anything about cuneiform, well, I mean, technically it's not stone. But hey, there was this famous thing called the Rosetta Stone. Maybe it's in there. We'll have to look that up. Yeah, but cuneiform was technically written in stone. If you want to call baked clay tablets stone,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen all those ancient writings. I mean, I certainly
Oh,
wouldn't know what
can
they
you read
say, of
them?
course.
Yeah, okay,
Of
good.
course not.
There are other people who
So,
can, and they have actually been able to interpret them, and they know that those cultures at that time said that. I mean, they even have illustrations of cultures at that time. They have basically illustrations which show a flat Earth with a solid dome over it, and they paint the stars on it, and the sun and the planets roll across it. So it's it's both written and it's an illustration of the cosmology of the time. So again, it's not. This is something that is not contested. We know that those cultures thought that at that time. But why are we talking about this? Other than the fact that it's something that you have to dismiss because, there are young Earth creationists out there that think Earth is flat. It's a pretty small minority. But we were talking about young Earth creationism, radiometric dating, VARVs, dendrochronology, ice cores. We were talking about, the Grand Canyon and the flood. But going right back to the beginning of this whole conversation, what I tried to have you talk about from the very beginning of this was the fact that you call all fields of science evolution science that you do not agree with.
no,
And I'm still trying to understand. Oh, you do. This came up when you were talking to Flynn. Was it last week? Was it the week before? This comes up
last
on
week.
Twitter all the time. This came up in the last two conversations that we have had. Everything that you call basically every field of science that you do not agree with, you call evolution science. But I'm still trying to figure
That's
out
not, well,
what is your theory of creationism. You still have not explained that, and that's kind of where I'm going to keep going back to. What is a theory in creationism? And when I asked that, you brought up, which is what took us down the whole rabbit hole of the firmament.
okay. Well, okay. So I was going to say that firmament could have changed the amount of carbon-14 that was in the, in wood or whatever you have back then. So if the carbon-14 percentage was less when it was laid down before the flood because of the firmament, it would skew the carbon dating of what we have and the known, and to compare that to known actual times that are, because we know dates from history up until about maybe 4,000 years ago. And I don't mean 4,000 years ago. Yeah, 4 to 5,000 years ago. It's pretty accurate. And then after that, it starts shooting up into the 40, 50, and 60,000 years. And that could easily have happened by that firmament being up there and causing less carbon-14 falling to the Earth, which would, because the ratio of carbon-14 to 12 and 13 is how they determine the age of things
And what is
in
your
ancient
evidence?
times.
And
so,
what is your evidence for this claim?
well, according to the creationists, they claim that they have.
What is your evidence? Come on, Craig. You are making
I'm
claims. You're
telling
not
you.
supporting. You're not supporting it with anything but making up claims after. You're basically presenting a claim, and then you're making another claim on top of that claim, and then you're making another claim on top of that claim. What is your evidence for this? And why is it refuted by VARVs, ice cores, and dendrochronology, which we all have sources going back far beyond your mythological Noachian flood, or far beyond your 6,000-year-old creation event? See, this is where I'm getting to the fact that you deny all of science if it does not agree with your theology.
Again, you're talking historical science, which you weren't there, so you don't have.
No,
You don't
that's
really
not.
have proof. You have.
No,
Yes,
that's
sir.
not.
You
That's
only
not
have the
the way.
science that
That's again.
you have the science the way you look at it,
Weak nuclear force used in
but you only
smoke
have
detectors,
that you own.
used in X-ray machines, used in everything that has something to do with isotopes. Weak nuclear force. You're trying to basically get rid of an entire fundamental law of physics.
Okay, I disagree
Yeah.
with that.
Well, you
But,
can disagree, but that's what you're doing.
Okay. So I did take a note on a couple things here.
Excuse me. So, Peter, it's almost been 2 hours now.
So
I think Craig has taken a lot of notes, which would be good for him to bring
taken a
back
few.
next time we talk. And I'm not trying to cut the conversation off, but again, it's been almost 2 hours. Got about 15 minutes before it is. And I think you've taken so many notes, Craig, that you would have like a whole nother 4 or 5 shows that we could deal with all these, things you've written down.
And I'm more than
and what's
happy
going to
to
happen? I'll
host
tell you
those.
something. You can say, well, you have no proof of that.
No, I keep asking you for evidence. That's fine. That's what I want you to do. I want you to take these notes.
So
I want you to look at our conversation
tell you
that we
my
just
notes.
had for almost the last 2 hours. No, you don't need to tell them to me. If you want to, post them on Twitter so
I
everyone
want to.
can see them.
I want to tell
No,
you.
no, I would
wanna
like you
tell
to
you.
actually post them on Twitter.
Can I make a
You never
suggestion?
You want to go
talk.
through it?
Can I make a suggestion instead of
It gets
posting
old.
them on Twitter, doing another show where Craig can present what he found. We had a few questions from
I would love
the
that.
chat.
Yeah.
Most of which have probably been answered, but there's one that hasn't come up yet. At least I think it hasn't. And that is from Jen with 1N, and I have to scroll back up to see if I can find it. So she asked, what about trees today that are older than the flood? And if I'm correct, it's not just trees, it's also
Seagrass,
a tiny forest.
corals.
Yes, corals.
Yeah.
Fungi.
We've got a whole bunch of other life forms that are much older. Yeah.
Yes. Craig, how would you
I would say
explain
they're
that?
not any older than 6,000 years. That's my answer to that.
A claim
they
without
are- they
evidence.
are
And
older. We have organisms
Okay.
that are 15,000 years old, 18,000 years old.
Well, no offense, but I mean that is your opinion, and that's what you're.
It's
the
not a guess.
scientific
It's not
evidence that you're
an
looking
opinion.
at.
It's a fact. It's evidence.
Well, you're
It's a
saying
fact.
that.
No.
And I
You're
just
saying
said that
you are
1,000
saying
times.
you are saying that it isn't, and we can easily research it online. I mean, I can type it into Google right now, and you can find out. Oh no, it is a fact that these organisms are older than your mythological flood or creation event by logs.
So-
sometimes.
So let me ask you this, and I'm sure you've seen these if you've watched any creation videos and stuff.
I've got
So there's
tons,
two
and I've got
evidences.
a lot of books. Evidences isn't a word. You do not have to pluralize. You do not have to pluralize a uncountable noun. So go back to schools and get more educations.
Okay, so number one, they have evidence, seeable evidence,
Which is
where you have.
what is the evidence? Okay, yeah.
Please don't interrupt. Please
No,
let me talk. I mean, you're talking like you're the smartest guy on the planet, and you're not.
No, I just want
You're
you
not
to. I
necessarily
just
the
want you to
smartest guy.
give the evidence. I don't want you to
I
say
am.
we have this. I want you to say here is the evidence. That's what I want. That's what everyone wants.
Oh.
If you look at the
You're
chat,
like talking to my daughter when she's 14 years old, and she wouldn't listen to anything I had to say. That's what talking you's like. So please let me talk,
go ahead.
because she was
What
always
is the
smarter
evidence?
than me until
No,
and
come
now-
on,
now she's the
Craig.
best
What
person
is
on
the
earth.
evidence?
But back then she was she was a 14-year-old. So I mean, let me talk without interrupting me, please. I would appreciate it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Let Craig
and
talk.
what you're doing by doing that, you're throwing me off kilter, and I'm an old man now, and you make me so I can't think straight. Could you just continue to call me a liar and I'm stupid and all this stuff? You got to stop. You got to let me talk, okay? I mean, yeah, I know you think you're smarter than me. I get it. I've heard that 15 times today, not to mention the 4,500 times on Twitter. So just let me talk, please. Oh,
Craig,
now
Craig,
what was I talking about?
you have the room. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I hear you. So, okay. So there's absolutely evidence that, because you're going to say, I would assume that these layers of dirt that come over the earth over these billions of years have happened a little bit at a time. So there's evidence of these trees that are vertical, and they got them in coal, and I've seen them pictures in like it's the Grand Canyon, places like that, where you got a tree that's vertical growing up through these rock formations, and you've seen those. Please don't respond yet, but you've seen them, and there's no way that those trees could have been there for tens of thousands of years to have that sediment grow around them, and they are fossilized just like everything around them. And then also to go along with Noah's flood, which goes along with the fact that there was the way I believe it, that you had all these layers under the water during Noah's flood that happened. So you had a volcano under the water. Here comes another kind of volcano. Here comes another kind of volcano. And maybe they're not called volcanoes. You might have another scientific name for them. But they keep piling up on each other. And while they were still soft, then you got these plate tectonics going on. Some of those rock formations, they bend like this, and then they bend back this way. And even some of them bend back down. And so if rock sediment is laying down slowly over 4 million years or 8 million years, whatever you want to come up with, it cannot happen. I mean, that bent rock cannot go straight down like that. The only way that can happen is through the Noah's flood, to where you had that soft sediment, and then the plate tectonics happened while they were still soft and bent them. And I've been through the Rocky Mountains. You see these rocks all the time. They're like that, and then they bend down some. Well, you can't bend concrete. It just snaps. It doesn't bend like a young tree. You take a young tree, you bend it, and it goes like that. You can't do that with rock, with solid rock. And what was that word you used? Anyways, it's about, because it's packed down after millions and millions of years. There's a name you have for that. Well, there's no way that tree can grow through that over that many years, because that tree would be dead. They don't live that long. And then also the same with the sedimentary rock. If it's solid rock that got laid and packed down, like you're suggesting it did, it cannot bend. It's impossible, because you cannot bend concrete. So those are the two things that I think are undeniable.
Okay, Greg.
So go ahead.
Yeah, I've already responded to both of those things more than a dozen times directly to you on Twitter. One of them, the first one you brought up, is called Polystrata trees, or Polystrate. The thing that I keep bringing up to you on Twitter is that we know how they happened. We know they were in subsiding zones, basically zones where the trees are slowly sinking. The most famous formation is in Joggins, which is in Nova Scotia. And the thing I keep bringing up about those trees is they're actually not trees. They're basically club mosses that were formed in the Carboniferous period, hundreds of millions of years ago. We know how they formed.
They're not trees?
Well,
they're not trees?
They're club moss. And again, I explained this on Twitter to you.
But that's not a tree.
Dozens of times. Okay. No, a club moss is not a tree. Okay, the trees that we have today are either gymnosperms or angiosperms. They are either what you would call a conifer, or what you would call like a tree that has flowers on it. Okay, there's a difference between the two. I'm not going to get into the difference between them. You can look it up. The things that we find these polystrata trees in, Joggins, again, the most famous formation in the world, has been studied since like the mid 1800s. We know it was
they're also in coal.
Yes, they're also in coal. In the Carboniferous period, hundreds of millions of years ago. Okay, they are not trees. They're basically these large club mosses that existed at the time before we had flowering plants, before we had gymnosperms. We know how they occurred. We know that the reason that they occurred is because of various things. One, those subsiding zones. Second, most of them were not actual fossils, they were casts. So basically you had something that sediments were laid down as the ground slowly subsided, the tree rotted out, and then you had sediments come in to fill it up. Because
just for a second, I'll let you get right back to it. I promise. I promise. I'll let you get right back to it. I promise.
Okay, go ahead.
I promise. Okay, so you're saying that these tree things or whatever you're calling those moss. You're saying that they sunk down into the. But you're saying they sunk down into the rock, right?
No. I'm saying that the area that they were at slowly subsided. I'll give you an analogous area in the U.S. right now. You have the Mississippi Delta. Because of sediments constantly being washed into that area, you have isostatic depression going on. Basically, you have all these sediments being washed in. It weighs down the earth crust. That area is slowly subsiding. You actually see this similar formation happening in the Mississippi Delta right now. Of course, the trees in those areas, are going to decay much more rapidly because during this time in the Carboniferous, when we find most of these polystrata trees, you didn't have anything that could break down lignin, which is basically what gives very tall plants their shape, their structure. So, and lignin didn't evolve until we had fungi that could actually break it down. And that's why we also have these huge layers of coals in the Carboniferous, because basically it was a very hot, humid period. You had basically worldwide swamps. The vegetation would die off, and instead of rotting, it would just sit there on the surface, not rot, get more stuff put on the surface, which then became coal. And that's why you have thick coal beds. That's why it's called the Carboniferous. Second thing that you brought up was...
Well, can I talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, go ahead.
Before you move on?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're suggesting that this thing...
No, the evidence is...
The moss, the moss you're suggesting is not a tree, but yet it grew
the lycopods,
30 to 40 to 50 feet. It grew just like a tree would, and it's 50 foot high.
Very similar,
and that's buried. And it's buried. I mean, some of the pictures I've seen, they look like they're 70, 80 foot long, high, and they're buried straight up, and they're not bent. They're not this way, but you're saying that thing grew and stayed there for the 5 million years it took for all this sediment to come around it. Is that what you're saying?
Is that how long it took? Is that how long it took for the sediment to be laid down?
You tell me.
No, you were the one who made the claim. You tell me.
I have no idea how long it is.
Good. So you can't make that. So you can't make that claim.
Well, I'll tell you what I think. I think it happened right away during Noah's flood.
And your evidence for that
is the evidence that you see is no different than the evidence that you're seeing.
No, I'm asking
during Noah's flood. During Noah's flood, and all the water was up. It was laying down these layers of volcanic. Sometimes it's sandstone. Sometimes
we should
another
see it all
kind
over
of
the
stone.
world. Then we should find No, we don't.
You do.
That's the whole point. Is that we don't.
You find it
basically
all over the world.
Your claim is that every single sedimentary layer out there, we should find these in it. That's what you're claiming.
Well, it depends. I mean, you got
it doesn't depend.
Understand. So you have Noah's flood, which was the Bible talks about it as it's a great catastrophe.
We're not talking about the Bible. We're talking about science. That's why I said
I'm talking
you
about
have to
science.
separate. You have to separate. No, you're talking about your theology.
I don't.
You're not talking about science.
I don't have to separate. You want me to separate it, but I don't have to.
Okay, and that is the issue, right?
But you want me to, but I don't have to play by those rules.
I'm saying that is the issue. You don't understand your theology compared to science. That was what I brought
yes,
up
I do.
When this whole conversation started.
To read, but it doesn't take rocket science to read a paper and know what it says and what it means, unless the guy
obviously
wrote it in some
you
kind
can't
of
present any evidence for anything
that,
you're saying. So let's get to the second point.
Yeah, I guess I can. Because what I'm telling you,
what did you bring up after Polystrate trees?
But again, if Noah's flood happened the way it was supposed to have happened, because you asked me how did that happen around those trees. So the Bible talks about a great catastrophe that happened. He completely destroyed the whole earth. Well, while he was destroying it, because he talks about the oceans of the deep, or the things of the deep, they came up out of the ground, and also the rain came down. So it's both things that happened simultaneously during the first half year. Huh?
Claim.
What?
Claim.
Well, okay, well that's
I'm looking for evidence.
And that claim, to me, is completely proved by the scientists that actually dig things up, and we can look at it. So, if it happened the way the Bible says it happened, if it happened the way the Bible says it happened, then you have all the oceans of the deep that came up, and I don't think that's the word oceans, but the deep opened up, which would make you think it could easily be volcanic action of some kind of volcanic action, which you had one come. And by the way, just a little side note, so you have all these things happening. So some of the trees probably stood there while they were getting buried at the same time. So
they're not trees.
Those
they're
trees,
ancient club mosses that, and trees as we know them didn't exist at that time period.
Well, they look like trees because they're big at the bottom and they get smaller as they grow.
Oh,
so they grow like trees. So you can call them what you want to call them.
If you encountered an elephant in the dark and you touched the leg, it would be a tree. And if you touched the trunk, you would think it was something else. You know, you understand that analogy, right?
But that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant to this conversation. Because what I'm trying to tell you is they grow. Whatever you want to call those things. Let me finish this. Let me. So they started out here, and then they grow like a tree, because the higher up in a tree you go, the smaller the trunk is. And that's what you see. So if Noah's flood happened the way the Bible says it, then if things came up out of the ground, like the volcanic action, it buried those things. It buried that tree as it went up and held it in the position that it was at. Because I'm assuming that you can't take dating and check the bottom of it and then check the top again and say that the bottom of it is
I've actually sent you scientific papers on that exact same thing from Joggins, from the Joggins Formation in Nova Scotia.
But and I'll try to find it. But if when you look at it, when you look at the evidence, it doesn't. There's nothing else makes sense. How could something grow?
You're making claims. You're not providing evidence.
Like
you're making claims. That's the problem.
You know, you can see it. I can see it with my own eyes. You can make up
what
evidence
was your second point
you
again?
Want, because
before we run out of time. Before we run out of time, what was your second thing that you brought up? Because I was just trying to think about it.
I don't know. I can't remember.
I don't know either. I'm gonna have to rewind it because.
Oh, the bent rock.
Oh yes. On that as well. It's called ductile.
I've never read any of them.
Oh gosh, and that's the thing, Craig. You are so selective.
I'm not afraid to read
but I send you scientific papers and you never respond to them. It's so weird.
Yeah, I do. I've responded to many of them.
No, you don't. I sent you I've sent you all of these links, illustrations. I've sent you you were very selective. I sent you all of these links and illustrations, and other people have as well. It's not just me. Other people have shown.
I've responded
and
to a lot of them.
I've sent you lab reports that basically show that yes, if you put rock under great pressure, it becomes ductile.
Let's see you do it.
It's been done in labs. It's been done in labs, and I sent you papers on it. You
can take rock and bend it.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. But you have to add chemicals to it, right?
No, you just have to put it under the right. You just have to put it under the right amount of pressure, and of course some heat as well, because it's down in the Earth's crust. But yeah, that's just a known fact. It's been replicated in labs. If you're talking about something you want replicated, that has been replicated in labs.
Okay. Well, I'd like to see that link. I'll see if I can find it. I'll go through your stuff.
Ductile.
I'll see if I can find it.
DUCTILE. Delta Echo.
I got
Charlie.
It. Ductile.
Okay. Just type in from me to you, ductile. You will see I have sent you scientific papers on this where they've done it in labs. Graphs basically showing you what pressure and temperature it needs to be for it to occur to basically make rocks plastic. Yep. Okay. Sent you many links to it. Probably over a dozen. Everyone
I don't think I've seen any of them.
Yeah, again, everyone right now who's listening here on YouTube, just look up my name on Twitter, Ductile. You will find dozens of links. And the most recent ones are to Craig. And there's probably, I'd say to Craig, there's probably at least a dozen.
I'll find him.
Good. And maybe this time you'll respond.
Okay, maybe I will.
Okay, we have to wrap it up. We're at the 2-hour mark. We do have one more question.
Is this Niagara Falls from Jen?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah, Jen with one N said, can you ask Craig to explain Niagara Falls, where she lives, in a creationist explanation, because the Native Americans recorded it over 10,000 years ago?
Yeah, Jen, I love this question because it's a complete Kent Hovind creationist thing, but I'd love to hear Craig respond to, Niagara Falls and the fact that it predates his mythological flood and creation event.
I'll look it up. I don't know. I've been there. I love it. It's a beautiful area.
Yeah, and the whole thing about it is it's not only, the reason I bring up Kent Hovind is Kent Hovind used to love to bring up the Niagara Falls, and he was like, how can it exist? If the Earth is only, this old, it should, the Earth is millions of years old, why does Niagara Falls exist? It should have, totally eroded all the way back to, Lake Erie or something. The nice thing about Niagara Falls is we have the Niagara Escarpment, and that's where the falls kind of started to be a falls. And we know through, archaeological dates, we know through, various other things, rate of erosion, we know why it's eroded back and how long it's taken to erode back. We can see the current rate of erosion on it. It's a total Kent Hovind straw man is what it is. And it's hilarious. And yeah, when I was scrolling through the messages and I saw that from Jen, I was like, Peter's going to bring this up, isn't he? Because it's so hilarious.
I mean,
the
I did
creationists even
put in,
use that.
Yeah, I did put in, as I always do, if people have questions, then they need to tag me in.
Yeah.
And I'll try to ask them. I just don't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation too much because...
Yeah, no, I understand.
But I mean, we have to wrap it up. I'm more than happy to do another show. Maybe if Craig can, he noted a lot of things. So what my suggestion would be,
just real quick, I'll tell you what I noted. Just to be real quick, I got down Niagara Falls, the ductile thing. What was the firmament? Solid crystal dome, the varves. The Washington Missoula flood, or whatever you call that, and then the Missoula, whatever you call that, Missoula floods, or you're saying those floods happened and caused all those.
I've sent you tweets. I've sent you numerous tweets on it before.
Sure. But, so
I get it.
here's my suggestion.
I'll try to find you some evidence on the sandstone that covers the whole country.
Here's my suggestion. If Craig wants to come back and looks up all these things and sees if he can find an explanation for those, that when we do another show, we will give Craig the floor and let him give for every subject all of his answers and then go through them one by one once Craig's finished. Is that a good idea?
No, I'd love that. Yeah.
What do you think, Craig?
That's a great idea.
I'm okay with that. Yeah.
You got
remember,
a lot of
evidence.
homework.
You got to give evidence, not claims.
Craig, you got a lot of homework from just 2 shows. You have to come up with questions for me and Flynn, which I really, trust me, I hope you do, because you would be the first to come back and ask us critical questions. That has never happened.
Sure.
I've offered it to every single guest we've had on here, and they just don't want to do it for some reason. I don't know. So, and I mean, we get along.
Because if they're like me, I haven't been in college since I've been in school for 50 years, so kind of tough to get back into that mode. But I'll try to do it and make some reports up and give the basic thoughts of it. So yeah,
it's slightly less for me though.
And maybe I can even. I can even get some.
I keep up with basically with social media and the people I bump into. At the start of the conversation, Scipher, you mentioned Tiktaalik. On April 2nd, I'm hosting a show on Natalia Reagan's channel, and our guest will be Neil Shubin. So.
Oh, nice! Wow,
For people
you
who
get all the
wanna
good
watch.
people,
Yes.
Peter. Jeez, I'm so jealous.
Yes. I mean, well, it helps that you know people.
You've got
who know
Ken
people.
Miller. You've got Neil Shubin.
Well, Ken Miller was going to come on my channel, and that has been agreed on. I think that was a few years ago, and I didn't get to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm hoping to get a few more interesting people on the channel. I've spoken with quite a few. Neil Shubin was one. Donald Prothero, I still want to have a conversation with. He's a very nice guy, and I've hosted 2 shows with Donald Prothero already. And I would love to talk to Donald Johansson, the man who found Lucy. I've already talked to him once, but I haven't had him on my channel. But I mean, we're a tiny channel, so we can't get everyone.
But you get like some of the best. It's great.
Yeah. Okay, so we have to wrap it up.
You've spoken with Mary Schweitzer and other people, so yeah.
No. Mary Schweitzer, I wasn't part of. That was on Orange Channel, and she didn't want a lot of people there, and she didn't want to do it live either because she's a bit tired of having to explain every single time how young Earth creationists are falsifying her work and falsifying her data and basically using it in the way it shouldn't be used. But that's a whole other conversation we could get into. So, famous last words. I'll start off with you, Scipher, and then we'll go to Greg because he's basically the guest, so I'll let him end the show.
Yeah, no, it's just that I've ran into this like for decades now since I've been doing this. Creationism is all based off of theological claims. It's pretty much all prats, which are points that have been refuted 1,000 times, and they just keep getting repeated. You know, it's the big lie. You know, say something often enough and loud enough, and hope someone believes you. And they do not understand that they've got to support their claims with evidence, and they can't basically say that, you know, oh, that's your interpretation of it. No, that's just what we're getting to, is that there's evidence out there. The way we interpret it is called a scientific theory. So theories explain facts. And if they really want to be taken seriously, what creationists need to do is they need to put their own theories out there. They just can't keep making these claims and hope that people are accepting their claims without any support. I think that's the main thing. You know, you've got to support what you're saying. Oh, you know, that's your guess. That's your interpretation. No, this is how we put together these different fields of evidence. And the reason that they all are consilient, the reason they match one another, is because we have this theory that explains why they match one another. So that's why that's why I started from the beginning. You know, basically asking for a theory, asking for evidence to support it. And I don't think that we've seen that. And that is really disappointing. You know, I don't want to, you know, I don't want to hear Craig make excuses. I've been out of school for this long. No, if you're going to make these statements, if you're going to, you know, say this is the way it happened, then please support what you're saying. Otherwise, it just seems like you're just pulling it out of thin air. And I was going to say pulling it out of somewhere else, but you understand where I'm getting this from, is that we just can't believe what you're saying. Trust me, bro. That's what it seems to come down to. It's a whole trust me, bro thing. You know, accept what I'm saying. Don't question it. And I hope that, you know, you will look at and try to construct something that is more than just one set of data here, one set of data there. Don't worry, they don't match. You know, I don't have any evidence for this. I'm just kind of saying what I think happened. let's not do that. Let's actually present evidence and talk about how it fits together and present it as a theory that we can then look and say, here's how everything comes together, instead of just, separate Gish Gallop type thing where you just throw out random facts and hope that people can't keep up with you.
Okay, well,
Okay.
I'm going to have to say you mischaracterized what I've said in multiple things with what you just said. So I'll come back and I'll give you more evidence, and what'll happen, I would guess, is you're going to say, well, that's not evidence. Well, how can you say that's not evidence? That's not your evidence, but it's evidence. And the scientists that I follow, they are actual paleontologists. They're all those, geologists. There's what do you call the DNA scientists? All the ones who all those. There's so many different kinds of scientists, and they believe in creation. And they're trained scientists in the major universities, but they look at the evidence in a different way. And you can't say, and here's what you said to combat that in the past. You've said, well, they're doing that because they want to make money. Oh, really? And you think that a scientist that believes in evolution isn't doing it for money? You think they're doing that for free? I mean, that's what you're suggesting. So I said all that to say this. Everything you just mischaracterized of the way I believe is just a mischaracterization. And your truth is your truth, and my truth is mine at this point. So, and you're not willing to give an inch on your points, and I'm willing to look at both sides, and I don't think you are. I don't think, I think it's kind of like what they said about different things. If I showed you a reason that cancer research is slowed down because of the evolution scientists, then you'd say, oh, that's crazy. So, I mean, there's different evidences. You're looking at it, and you don't want to admit to any of it, no matter how good it looks. So we'll see what happens. I'll look these things up, and we'll see how you respond. And I'll look them up. I mean, I don't have any reason not to, and hopefully I'll get them done this week. We'll see what happens.
Okay.
Did we lose you, Scipher? You're just kind of stuck.
No, you had the last word.
No.
Okay, I'm done.
We have to end it. Sadly, we have to end it here. From what I get, people loved watching the show, so that's a good thing. I liked hosting it, and I still like that on our channels we don't get actual dumpster fires, and I think that's a good thing. So, although I own the channel at Dumpster Fires on YouTube. Not kidding. That is me.
There's an actual channel called that? That's funny.
Yes, and I have had one guest on there, so. But let's not go into that because that's a terrible story. Okay, I want to thank everyone for dropping by. I want to thank both you, Scipher and Craig, for coming on. It was a good conversation, and I'm just looking forward to the next one.
I'm okay with it.
So, everyone, see you all next time. Bye-bye.